Hey, what's up? My name's Jake, and today's commander of the day is Jori En Ruin Diver. There's a couple different ways you can build Jori En, obviously, and izzet Spellslinger is going to be one of them. But I decided to take it in the direction of cantrips, which is just building a deck around card draw. Right out of the gate, this deck can kind of struggle to win the game, or at least just end it. So maybe that's something that you could help me with in the comments below, but I'll walk you through kind of what my philosophy was while building it and what I'm trying to make this deck do. So Jori En Ruin Diver's ability is very simple. She's a 3-mana izzet commander where whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you draw a card. It's a basic ability, but it is really good having card draw in your command zone. When I saw this second spell portion of her card text, I thought, okay, what's a card that meshes well with that? And the first thing I thought of was Alondra Skydreamer. This was one of my favorite cards in Magic. I run it in my Marneus Calgar deck. And her ability is whenever you draw your second card each turn, which is a little bit different from what Jori En wants to do. But whenever you draw your second card each turn, you create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. And then she has this huge pump if you draw a bunch of extra cards, which is very doable in this deck. So I saw this second keyword in Jori En and then in Alondra, and I'm like, okay, well, what works well with Alondra? Obviously, Talrand works well with Alondra. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you create a blue 2/2 Drake with flying. Okay, cool. Maybe we're going into Merfolk. We're not going into Merfolk. I thought about that too, but it's just a little bit too awkward with kind of what I wanted to do in terms of draw lots of cards, play lots of instants and sorceries. Merfolk is more of like a go wide, play more creatures in the deck. This needed to have a lot more instants and sorceries. So we're not going into Merfolk. This token section is honestly how I think this deck can pull together some semblance of a win. So another one to call out is Min Wily Illusionist. Min is really cool. I run her in my Marneus Calgar deck as well. And that is whenever you draw your second card each turn, again, seconds matter, create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token, and then it gets +1/+0 for each other illusion, and when it dies, you can play a permanent with mana value less than or equal to its power from the hand onto the battlefield. So, Min is great for cheating out some of our permanents that are a little bit more expensive. Granted, there aren't too many of them, but it's more here to create those illusions. Emrakul's Messenger is a fun card from the new Modern Horizons set. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you create what is basically a treasure token. It's a treasure token with only colorless mana. Improbable Alliance. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. So again, this isn't Merfolk where you have really good evasion and you go wide and then you swing in with all these pumped up Merfolk. This is a play lots of cards, draw lots of cards, and then create lots of tokens. That's the plan here. You can see the same with Murmuring Mystic. This is whenever you cast a spell. So we're either casting spells or we're drawing cards, and that's how we're getting our triggers. Create a token. Storm Chaser's Talent is a fun new card from Bloomburrow. So when it ETBs, you create a token with prowess. You can return instant or sorcery from your graveyard, which we're going to be casting a lot, so getting basically a rebound for an instant or sorcery is not too bad. And then when you get to level 3 using 5 colorless and a blue, you can cast an instant or sorcery to create a 1/1 with prowess. Now this is how I envision the deck winning a game, is you're creating a bunch of tokens with prowess, and then you're trying to sift through the deck for Bria Riptide Rogue, because this gives all your creatures prowess and then can make them unblockable each time you cast a non-creature spell. So that's how I envision this kind of working. Last call out here is Young Pyromancer, casting instants and sorceries, creating tokens. Okay, cool. So that's the game plan. That's what I'm trying to do, is cast spells, draw cards, make tokens. Cool. I don't really have any pump spells in this deck for those tokens, so they have to be evasive. That means, Alondra Skydreamer, Talrand Sky Summoner, these have flying. Murmuring Mystic, this has flying. Young Pyromancer does not have flying with its elementals, but we can give all these tokens unblockable with Bria Riptide Rogue. Bria Riptide Rogue is the biggest win con in this deck, and it takes a bit of work to do it. So you're going to be playing a lot of Magic playing this deck. Looking over here, I included 2 copy spells. So the first I want to point out is, let's talk about Storm of Saruman. It has ward 3 for 6 mana, and then whenever you cast your second spell each turn, again, seconds matter, copy it, except the copy isn't legendary, and I can choose new targets for the copy. There are a couple spells in this deck that would be useful in terms of copying. Obviously, some of the more expensive spells, like a Lorien Revealed, which is 5 mana for 3 cards, would be great. It's 5 mana for 6 cards. But just in terms of, what else can we do? Seagate Restoration. If we can copy this for 7 mana, you draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1, and you have no max hand size. So you are just you're basically turning your deck into your hand in the span of 2-3 turns. Seagate Restoration is going to do insane amount of card draw. But really, Storm of Saruman is here. Not in the perfect fit. Generally speaking, you want to do this in a deck that has much more expensive spells. But it's whenever you cast your second spell each turn, not on your turn. And what this deck is trying to do is, on your second spell each turn, cast an instant. And that instant is going to give you card draw. And that's really where this deck comes to light, and where it really starts to thrive is on each turn cycle, you're drawing 5-10 cards on other people's turns. So that can run away with the game really quickly once you get the pieces we're looking for, which, granted, those pieces are pretty narrow. The other card I wanted to talk about is Veyran, Voice of Duality. This is the commander I always look at when I'm talking about building or thinking about building an Izzet commander. I think Veyran's really cool. The art's also awesome. So what Veyran does is, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, put a +1/+1 on them. Again, if you're casting a ton of instants or sorceries in one turn, and then you've got Veyran and Bria makes Veyran unblockable, you pump Veyran and then swing in. Granted, it's not commander damage like you might usually have, but it's damage. And then if you're casting or copying an instant, it's a instant / sorcery trigger doubler. Not copier, doubler. So just more utility. Because we're struggling so much to win the game, I needed another way to basically increase how much tokens we're generating. And so that's really where Veyran thrives in this deck, is in the second ability of, okay, Talran's going to make 2/2/2 Drakes. Alandra's going to make 2/2/2 Drakes every time that triggers. So kind of gives us more bang for our buck. Obviously, I've talked about Bria. Bria is great. She's a new commander from Bloomburrow. Prowess. Other creatures you control have prowess, so you're casting a bunch of spells, pumping all these things up until the end of your turn, and then swinging in. When you have a near infinite meaning 100 cards in your hand from something like Seagate Restoration, there's a lot of opportunity to cast many spells in one turn. And especially when casting many spells in one turn is made easier with cards like Barrel, Chief of Compliance, which reduces the cost of instants and sorcery spells you cast. Goblin Electromancer, which does the same thing. Stormkiln Artist, which whenever you cast them, you make a treasure. And then Stormcatch Mentor, which does the same as the previous 2, reducing the cost of instants and sorceries. We also threw in a Sapphire Medallion to this deck. I don't do this in every deck I build, but with this only being 2 colors and primarily blue, we can look down here, the cost of the deck primarily is blue at 71%. It seemed like a pretty good opportunity to throw in a Sapphire Medallion, even though, a lot of the cards in this deck are solo blue pip. There are also opportunities to reduce something like an Arcane Denial. So Sapphire Medallion made sense. I threw in a Mind Stone because I needed just a little bit more ramp, and it is technically card draw. And then we threw in our classic Arcane Signet, Izzet Signet, Soul Ring, and Talisman of Creativity. Super common ramp, especially in Izzet. Relatively cheap, actually super cheap. So I was trying to keep the deck somewhat reasonable. It's $400. I try to keep them between $300 and $500 whenever I'm building just with no inhibitions. or no rules, like it has to be under 100 or anything like that. So try to keep them between 300 and 500. So there's several ways you can make this deck cheaper. Like for one, you could cut out Seagate Restoration, which is $30. Throw in like a 35-cent common. It's gonna change the deck in such a minuscule way. Of course, if you start cutting like this, and then you cut Bria, and then you cut like Veyran, those are some really important cards, especially these two. So, yeah, if you want to make it cheaper, go ahead and make it cheaper. It'll just make it a little bit weaker. So, Barrel, Chief of Compliance. I didn't mention his second ability, but whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, which we're in blue, we're running quite a few counters. You may draw a card and then discard a card. I think Barrel's really cool just as a card. I really like it, and every time I look at izzet decks, it's one of the first cards I look at, including. And that's pretty much it for ramp. So, Stormcatch Mentor has haste and prowess built in. That was the only thing that I couldn't remember if I talked about all of its abilities. So that is our super basic card draw, our evasion, our copies, the tokens we're making, our ramp. Let's talk about some removal real quick. So I tried to do as many instants as we could in this slot because we're trying to cast cards on our opponent's turn. This lets us draw cards. So instants, we've got a Braid, red destruction. Blue, an offer you can't refuse. It's a counterspell. Arcane Denial. This is a card draw counterspell. Blasphemous Pact is one of our two board wipes. I only ran 2. You certainly could run more, but it's a sorcery. I was trying to focus on instants. Chaos Warp, red removal. Counterspell, blue removal. This is our second board wipe. This one I included just because I thought it was cool. It deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker, equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. I would imagine this is often close to like 20 by the time you're looking to cast a board wipe. And then invert polarity. You either gain control of a spell, so this is pseudo protection, or you just flat out counter it. So kind of expensive for a counter spell, but if you steal a spell off of a 50-50 coin toss, which is kind of fun, you get the spell. You get to do whatever you want with it. So like if someone's trying to cast a Path to Exile on your commander, there's a 50-50 chance that you are going to bounce that at their commander. And then there's Lightning Bolt, Pongrify, Strict Serenade, and Swan Song. So pretty classic as far as red and blue go for removal options. And then instant card draw. So this is like the bread and butter of what this deck wants to do. And is also probably the biggest reason this deck struggles to actually win. You've got Brainstorm. It's in the thumbnail of the video. It's just, you're going to include it whenever you're looking, basically almost whenever you're looking at any blue deck, but certainly if you're looking for a Cantrips deck. Crimson Wisps is certainly not a win con, but is a fun political tool because you can give, let's say you're playing against a dinosaur deck. You can give any creature, it's an instant speed, so you can cast this on your opponent's turn. You can give any creature haste, and then you draw a card. So once again, this is actually like a really efficient red card draw. It's only one card, but it's replacing itself at least. But what's cool about this is you can target like a dino that someone just played, and it's like, hey, if you don't swing this at me, I'll give you haste so that your Gishath can get its attack trigger, right? Crimson Wisps is kind of cool. I know Gishath has haste, but like just as an example, big creature spell, doing big things, right? So you're getting the attack trigger. I know this has haste, but let's imagine it doesn't. So you can use this as a political tool. Demand Answers, card draw. Flame of Anor. I threw in a little bit of extra damage with some of these modal spells. You can, if you control a wizard, which your commander is a wizard, you can either draw 2 cards, destroy target artifact, or deal 5 damage to target creature. You get to pick 2 of those, but it's a pretty good modal spell. Granted, a little bit more expensive. Frantic Search, draw 2, discard 2, and then untap 3 lands for the cost. It's card draw, and again, we're trying to draw cards for, you're trying to cast instants and sorceries and then draw cards for several of our token spells. So that's really what we're aiming for with all this card draw. Izzet Charm is a modal spell. Leap is another fun one. So this is another opportunity for some politics to come into play. You give a creature flying until the end of turn. So if someone needs an attack trigger, you say, hey, I'll give you flying so you can attack someone and you're not going to lose your thing. Just don't attack me. you can kind of redirect damage around the board, and you can kind of think of this as like again, kind of a pseudo protection spell where obviously someone can say, yeah, sure, I'll take that flying and then swing at you, but you're probably never going to trust them again ever in a game of Magic. So it's in their benefit to kind of play to what you want them to do. Obsessive Search is much like Frantic Search, just lets you draw a card. Opt is up there with Brainstorm as well. Scry, then draw. This is really, really good because you're going to check to see if the top card is good. If it's not, you're going to put it on the bottom and then draw a fresh card that you haven't seen. Prismari Command is a modal spell. A bunch of different options. Does a lot of things for you. Kind of a toolbox in your time of need. Quick Study is just quick and easy card draw. It's not, mana positive, but it's super basic. And plus, if we're doing our cost reducers, it's pretty easy to make this 1 blue mana. Remand is a counter spell, but it just bounces the card back to their hand and you draw. So, you bounce like a 9 mana card, an 8 mana card like a Shath, and they're out the mana. You get card draw. Slick Sequence is some super simple 2 damage, and then if you cast another spell on the turn it's played, oftentimes you would play this on your opponent's turns, you draw a card. So you're playing a card. Let's say you're doing something like a counter spell, right? You're counter spelling someone's the first card they play in their turn, and then you cast Slick Sequence. You are doing 2 damage to a target. You're drawing a card, and then you're drawing a second card from your commander on your opponent's turn. Pretty good. So Think Twice is, again, right up there in the same category. We're just drawing cards at instant speed. Thrill of Possibility is the same. Twisted Image. Switch target creature's power and toughness until end of turn. This is a pseudo removal spell. It draws you a card, but you're switching someone's power and toughness as they assign the blocker. So let's say they have like an 8 or like a 1/8. And they're just like jump blocking a token. It's now an 8/1 and it dies. And then lastly, Visions of Beyond. I've actually never seen this card, and it's just because I'm new coming back to Magic, but the opportunity to draw 3 cards at instant speed for 1 blue when graveyard decks are so common now, and this deck is going to fill your graveyard with instants and sorceries, was really good. That's basically it for the deck. I included a couple different utility lands like Otawara Soaring City. If you're building a blue deck, at this point you're almost always including Otawara. I included Rivendell because scrying with card draw is really good, like I talked about before. It just gives, like with Opt, having the opportunity to look at the card first before you draw it and then decide if you want to keep it is really valuable. I include the Pathways in any 2-color deck. They're like my favorite lands in the entire game. And then there's just a couple random, there might be like 1 or 2 more, like Emergence Zone. You may cast spells as though they had flash, so if you need one of your sorceries over here, you've got it. And then Fountain Port is new with Bloomburrow as well. It's just a toolbox. It has a ton of different options for you, just for whatever you need. So I include this one as well. So going back to the beginning of this video where I said this deck kind of needs some help to end the game, where do you think I could have changed it? What do you think I could have optimized to include more damage, or more specifically, add in win cons? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this deck. It was fun to build, and I also don't build Spellslinger decks that often. I appreciate if you tuned in to the end, and I'm looking forward to seeing what tomorrow's commander is. Peace.